Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Imperfect PCOS podcast. Today, I am so pleased that we are joined by Ashley Reaver. She is a registered dietitian that focuses on helping women lower their cholesterol levels and improve their heart health in order to live a longer, healthier life. She offers a self-paced course to guide women on the exact steps to take to lower their cholesterol levels. In addition to her private practice work, Ashley is also a nutrition instructor at the University of California, Berkeley, UC Berkeley. So you can follow her on Instagram at lower.cholesterol.nutrition. Welcome, Ashley. You're listening to the Imperfect PCOS podcast, where we share no BS science-backed strategies to put your PCOS into remission. I'm your host, Corey Ruth, aka the Women's Dietitian. Let's get into it. We are back with another episode of the Imperfect PCOS podcast. Today, we are joined by my colleague and actually a friend of mine, and we'll talk briefly about that too, from back in the day, Ashley Reaver, a fellow dietitian who specializes in high cholesterol. Welcome, Ashley. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Corey.
Please tell listeners how we met initially.
Facebook group. I'm California dietitians, and we were going to split a motivational interviewing class like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we realized we lived like a mile apart. And we're like,
yes.
Oh, maybe we should meet.
Yes. So cool. I met Ashley when I was living in the Bay Area, and I had literally was just starting to think about going into private practice. And it was so cool to meet somebody who was kind of in that same zone and bounce ideas off of her. It feels like a lifetime ago, honestly. I mean, so much has transpired in both of our lives since then. So it's so cool to be able to reconnect.
Absolutely. And we both have done well with our practices with what we were doing as dietitians. So it's really cool to think back to when we were both like kind of scared and
what the hell
do we should be doing?
Yeah.
I need all education possible because I don't have the confidence yet.
Oh my gosh, totally. Definitely. And I feel like we've all been there at some point. Where are you living still in the Bay Area now?
Yeah, we're in South Bay.
Okay. Got it.
We've moved in opposite directions of each other.
Yes, I know. I've gone north, very north.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, but I still teach at UC Berkeley, so I'm still there 2 or 3 days a week.
Okay, so you're commuting up there. Wow. Yeah. Yes. Oh my, I know that commute. Okay. No, that's a long time. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. Awesome. Well, let's begin. Tell us how you got into this specific field. It's definitely such a needed space to work in as far as dietetics go. Tell us a little bit about your journey, how you got into this field.
Into dietitian or dietetics?
Yeah, let's start there. And then I want to go into the niche that you have created for yourself, which is so incredible.
Yeah. So I have always loved food. I'm from a massive family. I only have one sister, but my dad's one of 9 and his mom's one of 20. And 20 kids.
Oh my gosh.
All single births.
Wow.
Wild.
Wow.
They all like live very close to my hometown, which is a very small hometown.
Awesome.
So just like massive family gatherings with mass food production has just always been like my jam.
Yes.
And then when I went to college, I was originally pre-med. I wanted to be a pediatrician. And where I went to college, they picked your courses freshman year. And one of the ones that they made me take was Introduction to Nutrition. And I changed my major 2 weeks later. I had no idea that like you could work with food as a career, outside of like being a chef.
Right.
And it was just like, I was still pre-med. But I thought as a pediatrician, like parents would much rather me be able to tell them what to feed their kids versus like, this is what the cells in your child's body is doing. Because I was a bio major. And then as a nutrition major, my sophomore year, I had to take some sort of class, maybe nutrition in the life cycle. And that's when I learned what a dietitian was. So even as a nutrition major, I had no idea that there was, this field of being able just to work with people on their nutrition. Once I learned what that was, swapped into that being my career path. And then I've done all sorts of cool things, very different things, which is one thing I just love about being a dietitian. There's so many different avenues of what you can do.
Right. So true.
Yeah. It's I just love it. It's like a perfect marriage of a teacher and a
Mm-hmm.
nurse that also talks about
Yes.
food and poop all day, just like my passion.
So true. I feel like that's such a common thing to hear. So many dietitians start out pre-med or thinking that, they want to go into, become physicians, myself included, and then kind of pivot, realizing, I kind of want to be on the preventative side
Hmm.
of this whole, we start to really see and understand what our healthcare system looks like in detail. Tell us about getting into the cholesterol space. How did you decide to pivot? Because you were working kind of more generalized nutrition, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
when we first met, and then you really like switched gears, and I was so excited to see that because, like I said, it's just so needed.
Yeah. So I think, in my private practice, accepting insurance in the Bay Area, even though there's millions of people that live here, there's
Right.
very few dietitians that actually accepted insurance. So I kept it pretty general so I could
Yeah.
help as many people as
Right.
possible.
Okay.
With a general practice, I saw so many women in particular that would show up with elevated levels of cholesterol that just kind of
Hmm.
came out of nowhere.
Yes, it feels like
And,
that.
for a lot of people, the thought about cholesterol is that it's an old man disease. This guy sits
Right.
on the couch, eats chips and drinks beer, has high
Right.
cholesterol, and gets on a statin, a cholesterol lowering medication in his 60s. And that's
Right.
the only person that gets impacted with high cholesterol. So
Got it.
it was kind of a lot of like fear and shame when women would come to me and
Mm,
like feel like they had to
sure.
whisper that they had high cholesterol. When in reality, just as many women as men have high cholesterol.
Is that right? Okay.
And
Wow.
I'm not quite sure why it has to
Hmm.
be so hush hush for women.
So true.
It's something that impacts so many people, like 90 million adults in the United States have high
Wow.
cholesterol.
It's a lot.
It's super prevalent, but the resources for it are just garbage.
Yeah. Yes.
Don't eat fried foods, don't eat red meat, and
Avoid
like don't
processed
put
food is
butter
my
on
favorite.
everything.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
just generic.
Right.
And for
Here's a
so many
handout.
people, yeah, they don't eat fried foods for every meal.
Right.
They maybe only eat red meat once a week already, and they're not
Right.
putting a pound of butter on their broccoli every night. And
Right.
that was kind of the resources or support, I guess, support in quotes that people would
Hmm.
get from their doctors about what they could try and do.
Right.
I'd get plenty of women that were in smaller bodies saying that my doctor told me I have to go on a statin because I don't have enough weight to lose to lower my cholesterol without
Oh my
medication,
gosh. Wow.
which is just
Yeah.
such
Sounds
like
like
a
PCOS,
mind
honestly.
F. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's,
Wow.
so, I had a lot of experience with clients coming to me working with cholesterol. And
Hmm.
then it kind of like came to a head in 2020. I teach nutrition classes at UC Berkeley. In summer of 2020, I was teaching our
Mm.
introduction to nutrition course, and
Hmm.
we covered lipids. Instruction was all online. And in that like lipid lecture, I talked about what cholesterol is, where it comes from, things that can
Hmm.
influence why some people have higher levels than others,
Hmm.
even if they eat the
Right.
same diet. But then
Fascinating.
specifically the lifestyle things that you can work on. And one student showed it to a parent, and I got an email from that parent saying, like, thank you so much. I've been on statins for 10 years and I've never
Oh my
gotten this
gosh.
information. And then I just had like a
Hey,
light bulb
light
moment of
bulb.
like, okay, online education, we've been forced to do it, but like we know
Yeah.
it works.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
this information is wasted on 18 and 19-year-olds that have like, are not going to remember when they have high cholesterol, maybe in their 40s, anything about what
Mm,
we talk about.
right.
And there was
So true.
nothing out there. No one was focusing on cholesterol.
So true.
So it was a like supernatural pivot.
Cool.
And I'm so glad I did because it's been a super successful
Yeah,
program. Of course, members have had a lot
totally.
of great success, but also there's been such like a need for it, and just creating community around that, I think, has also
Yes,
been really helpful since, again, for women in
totally.
particular, it's something that they haven't, why am I the only woman that has this, which isn't the case.
Right.
So it's been nice for
Right.
them to be able to communicate, I think, with other people experiencing the same thing.
Definitely. Yeah. Just that community aspect alone, I find can be so crucial to somebody's health journey, honestly. I mean, all of us. I want to start with defining what high cholesterol is. And I also want to cover what are some of the causes, if any, do we know, behind this? And well, let's start there because I don't want to overwhelm you. I have like so many questions, but we'll start with those two, kind of definition and what are some potential causes?
Sure. So cholesterol is just a type of fat that we have in our body. three primary types of fats. We have triglycerides, which are 95% of the foods we eat, as well as
Okay.
95% of the weight of fats in our own body, how we store
Okay.
them,
Okay.
are in the form of triglycerides. We have something called phospholipids, and then we have cholesterol. And cholesterol
Okay.
is something that is required for human beings. I think that's
Yes.
misconception number one, is that
Yes.
you need it. It's not,
Mm,
all
all bad.
cholesterol is not bad.
Right.
It is the basis for so much in our body. It's in every single cell in our body. We need
Mm-hmm.
it for production of sex hormones, our stress
Yes.
hormones, vitamin D, and it
Right.
also produces a digestive compound that we need to be able to break down and absorb
Mm-hmm.
fats that we eat, called bile. We'll probably come back to that a little bit later.
Interesting. Okay.
Um, so it's just a type of fat that's a precursor for all sorts of stuff in
Okay.
the body. And well, we typically get tested on a lipid panel. If you were to go to your doctor and get that LDL or HDL,
Mm-hmm.
total cholesterol tested as lipoproteins is really what they're testing.
Okay.
So LDL stands for low density lipoprotein.
Okay.
Just think
A lot
about,
of acronyms,
you know,
peeps.
yeah, fats floating around in water, they separate, they rise to the
Yes.
top. So if you make salad dressing at home,
Oh, yeah.
the same thing would happen if you had
Mm-hmm.
just free floating cholesterol in your bloodstream. It would just
Okay.
like kind of rise to
Just
the
kind of
top,
chill
stick
there.
there, clump together.
Okay.
It wouldn't be able to move around and go to literally every single cell in our body that
Right.
needs cholesterol.
Mm-hmm.
So our body packages it into these little lipoproteins, and then what gets measured on that lipid panel is they look at those lipoproteins. In particular, they try and measure the cholesterol within
Okay.
them.
Got it.
As far as what cholesterol could do, if you have too much cholesterol in
Mm-hmm.
your system, or really it's too much of a particular
Right.
compound on cholesterol,
Okay.
for too long, it can really start to get underneath the lining of your arteries.
Okay.
The intima is what that's called, and that can
Okay.
cause damage to your arteries, and your body's going to try and fix that. So,
Okay.
um, through a series of steps and pathways, ultimately, basically, some white blood cells can die there trying to fix that. Then they start to
Mm,
accumulate, they can get calcified. And that's what
okay.
causes that plaque that maybe we hear about, atherosclerosis,
Yes.
that thinning of the arteries. And
Yes.
cholesterol has to be present for that
Okay.
atherosclerotic plaque to build, but it's not
Got
the
it.
only factor that's there.
Okay.
Um, you can't do it without cholesterol, but it's cholesterol plus other things that make that plaque start to
I
develop.
see. Okay. So it's kind of like it's necessary. But and what can that lead to?
So if it ultimately fills the artery, you can have a
Hmm.
blockage that's there. So if you've heard of
Okay.
anyone that's had, triple bypass surgery or quadruple
Yes.
bypass surgery, that's because they have to go around that blood vessel that's now been completely blocked. Blood
Mm,
can't get to the heart. If that blockage breaks off, it can also travel other places. So that, blockage could travel into smaller blood vessels in the brain that can prevent blood from getting up there, and that can cause a stroke.
ooh, okay.
So when you hear about heart disease, typically it's
Yes.
in relation to preventing heart attacks or preventing strokes, preventing
Okay.
that blockage of blood flow.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for defining that. And what are causes? Like why would somebody suddenly have high cholesterol when they maybe didn't before? Or we can
So,
talk about risk factors too.
sure. So genetics definitely can play a role.
Yes.
Typically for genetics, though, and this is something that I hear a lot and something that I have tried really hard to dispel, is
Yeah.
just because you have other people in your family that have
Right.
high cholesterol does not mean that you are genetically predisposed to have high
Oh,
cholesterol.
okay. Interesting. A
So
lot of us think that.
sure, there's certain, maybe some of us are much more sensitive to certain nutrients, but I think, a lot of times we forget that in your
Mhm.
family, you inherit a lot more than just your genes. You're also
Right.
inheriting foods that you eat all the time, foods that are weird
Yes.
and you just never see on your plate, how you
Right.
celebrate, maybe what normal activity looks like. So if you have a
That's so
sibling or
true.
an aunt or an uncle that also have high cholesterol, it doesn't mean that there's nothing you can do about it because it's in your genes and you're going to have it. So that's
I
a
like
big
that.
thing that I like to just put out there, that your family history
Yes.
is so much more than your genetics, and it doesn't mean it's
Yes.
out of your control.
So true. That's so empowering. I think that's such an important piece to this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And and so much related to your health feels, I certainly suffer from anxiety, and health anxiety is
Mm-hmm.
a very real thing, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to
Mm-hmm.
hone in as much as possible on the things that you
Mm-hmm.
have control over
Yes.
versus things that you're never going to be able to change is an
Right.
empowering way, in my opinion, to approach your health. Stop stressing out
Totally.
about that one factor that is never
Yeah.
going to change and you can't
Yes.
impact it. Instead, think
Right.
about all of this stuff that you can
Yes.
intentionally decide to do every single day that can move the needle.
Right, right. And what better place to start than the delicious food on our plates?
Exactly. So that family history
Okay.
is a piece. Genetics, some
Okay.
people, there
Genetics
is
potentially.
genetically
Got it.
high cholesterol called familial hypercholesterolemia that
Mm,
impacts about 5%, or
okay.
excuse me, about 10% of people that have high cholesterol. So
Hmm.
10% of the 90 million adults in the United States have this genetically high cholesterol. And
10%.
typically
Okay.
that's an issue of either your body not getting the feedback of, hey, I've made enough cholesterol, stop producing it, or our cells in our body not being able to remove it from our circulation enough.
Okay. Got it.
And importantly, that is 10%. So 90% of people,
Yeah,
while there
that's not
might be
much.
small genetic variations, they don't
Right.
have this condition that no matter what you do, you have high cholesterol.
Right.
And the people that do have that, they typically have high cholesterol when they're 16, 18, 21. The very first time they get their cholesterol tested, it would be
Hmm.
high.
Interesting. So
For
good
a
to
lot of
know.
other people, it comes later in life.
Okay.
And that could be lifestyle factors, certainly have an impact.
Okay.
Menopause can increase your cholesterol levels.
Oh, okay.
But also, I think for a lot of people, you're no longer maybe as active. Your food
Hmm.
choices are shifting as your schedule
Sure.
is much more constrained, taking care of other human beings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Amen.
and yeah, lifestyle definitely can play a big role in that.
Okay. Okay. What are some risk factors for elevated cholesterol?
I don't know if there's necessarily risk factors that are like a blanket, like
Okay.
certainly as you get older, your risk
Okay.
factor
Age,
increases. Yeah.
menopause. Okay.
Maybe if you have,
Got it.
genetically high, if you have family
Okay.
members that maybe are on statins, potentially.
Sure.
Um, but certain types of diets tend to impact
Hmm.
some people much more than others, and activity for sure can play a role in that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, you can talk about body fat percentage, but I'd prefer to think about it as the amount of lean muscle that you have in your body. If you have less
Hmm.
lean muscle, your
Hmm.
cholesterol levels could certainly be elevated.
Okay. Got it. Good to know.
There's no way around it. PCOS is complex and multifaceted. What we know about it, including how best to treat it, is constantly changing. That's why I've dedicated my life's work to helping women put their PCOS into remission. Inside my signature program, the PCOS Boss Academy, women lose weight permanently without restriction and master their most stubborn PCOS symptoms. If you're looking to get pregnant or want to be a mom in the future, my ultra successful Get Pregnant with PCOS program supports moms to be every step of the way in conquering PCOS symptoms and bringing home the baby of their dreams. Plus, there's an additional weight loss mode to check into. These are all of the science-backed nutrition and lifestyle tweaks you need to improve your PCOS and change your life from a qualified healthcare provider and leading PCOS expert in the field. Ultimately, we are in control of our PCOS, and I would love to work with you inside one of my upcoming programs so you can step into the best version of yourself and start feeling like you again.
Really quickly, I want to touch on kind of PCOS and high cholesterol because a lot of my clients, excuse me, I made my like chai tea way too spicy this morning. I put way too much powder on there. I don't know what I was supposed to go nuts. I'm like, whoop, it's Friday. I'm like the black pepper. Okay. So I want to talk about, PCOS and high cholesterol because a lot of patients, clients, program members who I work with tell me, come to me saying, "Oh my gosh, I got my labs done and I've never had high cholesterol. Like, what is this? The doctor said I had high cholesterol." I'm like, "Oh, okay, like let me look into it." So it's quite common, but I want to dispel the myth that PCOS causes high cholesterol because we can often see them together, but that's likely due to some of the other factors that we just talked about. It's not PCOS doesn't cause high cholesterol. Although we can, and I love if you would talk about the insulin connection because of course we have to bring insulin into the conversation. It's in
Sure.
every convo here. In terms of PCOS, insulin, and cholesterol, is there a connection potentially there?
Yeah. Two
Okay.
things. I would think one thing I should have said before is where cholesterol comes from.
Okay.
Um, your body makes cholesterol from anything that can contribute energy. So protein, carbohydrates,
Mm,
fat, or alcohol all get
okay.
broken down into this compound called acetyl-CoA that our cells can either
Mm,
use to create energy or
hmm.
we can use for cholesterol production. So
Okay.
excess intake of energy over what your body can realistically use, you're going to have an excess of this acetyl-CoA. One of the things your body can do with it is create cholesterol.
Okay.
And oftentimes that's one reason why we can see if there's weight gain that's happening,
Mm-hmm.
an elevation in cholesterol can go hand in hand with that because
Okay.
there's a surplus of energy.
Right.
Your body's got to do something with it. One of those things is creating cholesterol.
Got it.
For insulin in particular, insulin resistance is certainly something that happens often in PCOS.
Yes.
And that what insulin does in our body is so much stuff. It's an anabolic hormone. It's something that supports growth.
Right.
And cholesterol is also something that supports growth. Anytime you're in a growth phase, your body is using a lot more of that cholesterol. So if your insulin levels are higher, that can also be something that definitely supports more levels of cholesterol being produced in your body.
Okay.
The flip side of that, insulin helps to inhibit certain things that could help us break down cholesterol. And be able to utilize that.
Yes.
So if insulin is high, we're also inhibiting those processes that would otherwise help us reduce the amount of cholesterol that we have. If you think about breaking down fat in the body, which is something that during normal metabolic times only happens really when we're underfed, our body would be breaking down excess fat to be able to use it as energy.
Right.
That can result in a lot of additional triglycerides in our bloodstream. Can cause, again, a lot more of those particles that have ApoB is what it's called, that potentially artery damaging aspect that we find on LDL, which is why we measure LDL.
Okay.
So the connection is not necessary that insulin automatically results in elevated cholesterol, but insulin interferes with processes that either can increase cholesterol's usage, or can increase the release of certain, things like triglycerides that can have an impact on that lipid panel.
Fascinating. Okay. So that's why we can see that, potential connection. But yes, it doesn't automatically mean you're going to have high cholesterol if you have PCOS. Okay.
Yeah.
What if you mentioned this before, but I just want to go over this like a little boom, boom, boom list. If we are interested in getting well, first of all, let me back up. How would we know is there any outward symptoms of high cholesterol?
Not really.
We have to, okay. You have to get tested. Okay.
Yeah. You can't stand on a scale or look in the mirror or look at your skin, whatever, to see it. For
your hair
some
doesn't turn
people,
blue. Yeah.
Right. For some people, if your cholesterol level is incredibly high, you might start to see some in your eye. But at that point, I strongly hope that you had tested. Someone has noticed some point in your life to test you earlier.
What do you mean in your eye? Sorry, what does that mean?
So it can start to deposit around your eye, fatty deposits of cholesterol.
I did not
people,
know that.
again, with extremely high levels might see deposits of stuff on their skin. But
because it has to go
those
somewhere.
are things that we saw with genetically high cholesterol before they necessarily knew what that was. They're super rare, very, very rare thing.
Yeah.
So getting your blood tested is how you got to do it.
Okay, got it. So you have to get this testing, and that's why it's so great to get labs done regularly, once a year if you can, which is typically covered by insurance. So what lab tests are we going to ask for if we want to, and this might be included already, but not always. Sometimes we really have to advocate for, ourselves in a medical setting as far as what specific testing we want done. What are the tests that we would ask for?
So most of what insurance covers is just a basic lipid panel, which is okay. It's not bad. And in that lipid panel, you usually have your total cholesterol, which is not so important, but you also would have your LDL, HDL. Sometimes they'll test non-HDL cholesterol, and then usually have your triglycerides in there as well. That non-HDL cholesterol is a really good measure because it shows how many compounds have this protein on them called apolipoB. And that is kind of, I think, where most preventative research is going, is looking at how much ApoB you have, because that's the type of compound that can really be the most atherogenic. And you don't just find it on LDL, even though of all of the types of lipoproteins in our body, LDL is where the majority of that ApoB is. But some people might have it on precursor to LDL called VLDL that sometimes is included in that panel. Sometimes it's not. There's another marker called lipoprotein little a. LPA is how it's often viewed. And that lipoprotein is not something that's tested. It's like a relatively newer one that's being tested for people that have a family history of very early cardiovascular events. So, a parent that has a heart attack in their 40s, they would test this LP little a, because that also has a lot of this ApoB on it. So if a normal lipid panel, I don't want to ever say is bad, because we still have a really strong correlation to LDL levels and incidence of heart disease, and decreasing LDL levels is the best treatment that we really have for preventing cardiovascular events in the future. That non-HDL that you sometimes see on there is technically a more specific measurement than just LDL. But what those two things are like trying to get us a proxy of is this ApoB. So any particle that has this ApoB on it is the type that could be somewhat potentially dangerous. And you can get ApoB tested. It's new. The likelihood that your insurance would cover it, unknown, because it's not technically part of clinical guidelines. I think absolutely it'll get there, but it's going to take years and years to get the committee to redo the guidelines, that then insurance is going to take an extra year, or who knows, multiple years to accept that type of thing. But you can pay for that out of pocket. So like if you're getting a hard time getting it from your doctor and they order it for you, your insurance might charge you $100 for it, versus you could go into a Quest and ask for it and get it for maybe $25.
Good to know. Hot tip.
So action item to do if it's something that you're concerned about. Again, it doesn't mean LDL is bad. If we're testing LDL, we're probably going to get a big, the thing that has the most of this potential ApoB on it. If you have elevated LDL, there's a pretty strong likelihood you're going to have elevated ApoB. If you have normal LDL, we might be missing a high ApoB that we're not picking up because we haven't tested VLDL, or maybe your test doesn't have this non-HDL cholesterol. I mean, it's certainly not picking up that other lipoprotein A. So if you can, ApoB would be ideal.
That's okay. That's really good to know. I really hope that our testing becomes more comprehensive, because I think, the more data we have, the better. Why not, if it's out there? Okay. Very cool. And
I would say too, just having high cholesterol is important to note. That doesn't mean that you're going to have a heart attack. Unfortunately, a symptom for a lot of people of the first sign that they have high cholesterol perhaps is a heart attack. Hopefully, again, this is why you take some of those preventative steps beforehand. But that cholesterol is there. I always like to think about it as like the match, but what really strikes that match is inflammation in your body, and some things that we know can cause inflammation. Number one biggest cause of inflammation is smoking. If you are smoking, please stop. And unfortunately, this is any type of smoke. Of course, we have a lot of research on cigarette smoke. We don't have very much research on smoking marijuana, since it's relatively new in the legal things, as well as vaping. However, it's probably a pretty safe assumption that even if it's not nicotine or tobacco, ingesting hot things into your lungs is probably causing some damage. And that damage doesn't just stay in your lungs. We know that high blood pressure can also increase the risk. Insulin resistance is something that can increase the risk. Excess body fat, in particular that visceral body fat, can also be something that increases that risk, just because it introduces inflammation. It can make that process really accelerate.
Yeah, it's kind of right around your vital organs. Okay. If somebody gets a diagnosis of high cholesterol, what is the typical treatment protocol that they're offered in kind of a conventional medical setting? And how do you feel about that?
I think it varies. I have absolutely worked with so many people because they go to the doctors. They get their blood work done after their doctor's appointment. So why we don't do blood work before your doctor's appointment, so then you can talk to your doctor about those results.
That's so true. I literally never thought about that. Duh. Wow.
So they go to the doctors, outward symptoms appear fine. They get a blood test. And then before they even get a phone call to review the results of their blood test, they get a phone call from their pharmacy. Their doctor has called in a statin, this prescription, which is, it's either 3 or 4 of the top 10 drugs sold in the United States are statins. And it's very common to have high cholesterol and be prescribed medication. So I get a lot of proactive patients being like, they didn't even tell me about what cholesterol was. They didn't necessarily review my results. but I'm getting this call from the pharmacy that I have a prescription to pick up.
Wow.
And of course, that rubs some people the wrong way. Other people are just like, okay, my doctor said that I need this, which I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily saying is
Right.
bad.
Totally.
Other times people might be like, okay, can you give me 3 months to work on it? And your doctor would be willing to say, all right, let's check this again in 3 months and see if you've
Okay.
been able to make improvements.
Mm-hmm.
Other times you might also, depending on your level, doctors might say, well, let's just watch it and see what happens. And that's the
Okay.
one that really irks me a lot, because if you just
Uh-huh.
watch this, you're just going to watch it increase. If you don't take action to
Yeah.
change something, it's not going to be a surprise when the next time
Yeah.
you go back to the doctor's office and now you are in the range where medication is
Yes.
something that should be recommended.
Right.
So I would love if, instead of let's watch this because it's been slowly creeping up over years,
Mm-hmm.
if there was some sort of conversation of, it hasn't always been elevated. So maybe, try out an intervention, please talk to a dietitian,
Yes.
or just suggestion of lifestyle interventions can be something that could change this level and stop this
Yeah.
upward trajectory. That would be my ideal.
I mean, that
And
makes
most doctors,
perfect sense, Ashley. I
yeah,
don't know. Crazy.
of giving someone a little bit of support or hope
Yeah.
that they can have an
Yeah.
impact on their own health. Things aren't just
Yes.
happening to them. But
Yes.
again, I've also heard from plenty of course members that say, my doctor said I don't have enough weight to lose, so he gave me a statin because I'm not going to be able to do it with just diet and lifestyle. And your body weight is not what determines your cholesterol level.
Right.
So,
Right.
you could lose weight and your cholesterol levels could skyrocket because
Okay.
the nutrients that you're taking in aren't ones that
Right.
necessarily support a healthy cholesterol level. Or you
Yeah.
could lose weight and your cholesterol doesn't budge whatsoever. And
Right.
I think that that's a big frustration for a lot of people is, I did what my
Yes.
doctor said, I lost 15 pounds and my cholesterol went up, or my
Right.
cholesterol didn't move. And then that sets in the
Totally.
feeling of, there's nothing that I can do. I have to take this
Right.
medication.
Oh
When
gosh,
in
that's such
reality, there's things that you can do. It's just you weren't
ah.
doing the right things, unfortunately.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And do statins have side effects? Why I'm not super familiar with that medication.
They
Is
can for
that
some people.
okay? Okay.
I would definitely not say that they're an unsafe drug, but there are definitely
Yeah.
people that report having muscle pain, like
Oh,
a lot of
interesting.
cramps that can happen. It can increase your risk of developing type 2 diabetes really slightly, and again, only in really specific people.
Okay.
But there's absolutely a group of people that have tried statins and cannot take them.
Okay.
It just causes a lot of pain. We do have other options for medication, but there's also a big group of people that don't want to take any medications. And mentally, a lot of people feel like it's a failure if they have to go on statins. And I always just like to tell people, if that's the case, you're super fortunate that we have a medical option
Yeah,
to help with
totally.
this, because there are so many
Yes.
conditions that we have no medical treatment for.
Yes. So true.
And be
So
thankful.
true.
Statins are, really, really
Right.
effective.
Right.
However, I wish that more people would try and do it with the right interventions and with encouragement to
Yes.
try the right interventions before thinking
Yes.
that they have to go on this medication. That is a lifelong medication.
Right.
You will have to stay on it.
Feel the exact same way about metformin and PCOS. So, in terms of alternative treatments and interventions, how do you work with clients to shift these numbers for them, shift these levels for them, get them out of the danger zone?
Yeah.
What are some things that you do in your practice that you recommend if somebody is saying, hey, I don't want to, maybe I don't want to take a statin or, a drug, or maybe I want to wait and see and try to do this on my own. What can they
Yeah.
do?
So I offer a course that really walks people through how to
Okay.
identify
Amazing.
sources of specific nutrients that are
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're in excess or are lacking in their diet. In that course, the first phase of it is just talking about what cholesterol is, dispelling
Yeah.
myths about cholesterol, talking about where it
Cool.
comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, for a lot of people, that there's no conversation about
Yeah.
what cholesterol is. And if you go on, TikTok or Instagram, it's a dumpster
Mm.
fire. And unfortunately, that is where
Yeah.
most people get their information.
Yes. Yes.
So not all cholesterol is bad. We
Right.
need cholesterol, but we don't need it in excess. We do not
Mm-hmm.
need to eat it. Our body produces all that we need.
Mm-hmm.
So that phase one is kind of just in clearing up things that you may have heard or maybe have never heard about what cholesterol is and what it does in your body.
Nice.
And then phase 2, we talk about some specific nutrients to focus on. So there's one to focus on getting more, one to try and monitor how much you're taking in, and then one that really doesn't matter that gets way too much attention in the media.
Is it eggs?
Yes, cholesterol, dietary cholesterol, which eggs are high in, as are shellfish.
Yes.
But dietary cholesterol has a very, very, very small impact on our cholesterol.
Mind blown.
Yeah. It's not like we eat an egg and then automatically all of that cholesterol gets absorbed into our bloodstream and has the impact of cholesterol that we would produce ourselves on our body.
I just picture like an egg, like just heading towards the heart, just like da 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 da, and just like getting like sucked into an artery. Yeah.
But
do you get asked about eggs every day? Do you get asked about eggs every day?
Every time I post a picture in my stories of I've had eggs today, there's just so much. And I'm like, you should take my course because you're wasting your energy on something that doesn't matter.
Right.
So that dietary cholesterol really has a pretty tiny impact. And I feel like it's every like 5 years it comes up in the media of, one very tiny study did something. And then it's, on the front page of Time magazine again, everyone's freaking out. But the, dietary guidelines for Americans, they removed cholesterol as something that Americans need to focus on limiting.
Oh, Lordy Lord. It's good.
Yeah, and and that's because it's not necessarily what has the biggest impact on your cholesterol levels. You can still find it on food labels. I'm sure it's coming that they might take that off. But also cholesterol is something you can only get from animal products.
Yes.
So that's another myth that comes up a lot is I thought I couldn't eat this because it had cholesterol. Well, if it's not from an animal, it's going to have zero cholesterol, which is another thing that comes up. So dietary cholesterol, like people go invest so much energy in avoiding eggs, which are a great source of lean protein, as well as shrimp, great source of lean protein, because they're trying to restrict to this nutrient that doesn't necessarily have that much of an impact. Another thing to focus on adding is soluble fiber. Soluble fiber is the type of fiber that swells when it comes into contact with water. So a great way I like to explain that is visualizing putting oats, chia seeds, beans in a cup of water overnight. They look different. Broccoli and celery, great sources of fiber, but a different type of fiber, this insoluble fiber.
Right.
If you put broccoli and celery in water overnight, they look like broccoli and celery in the morning, and that's because they don't have the soluble fiber. That soluble fiber is so important because it can actually impact our utilization of cholesterol in our body. As I talked about before, we need cholesterol for the structural integrity of our cells. There's nothing that I can do mentally or like intentionally to increase the structural integrity of my cells. I don't influence that process.
Right.
The production of sex hormones or stress hormones, for the most part, I'm not going to influence. I'm not going to be like, yes, I really want to increase my testosterone, and therefore my cholesterol levels are going to go down because more cholesterol is being used to make those.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
Your bile, that digestive compound, is something that we can influence. So our body excretes bile when we eat meals that have fat in them. Bile, we're super efficient at recycling it. About 97 to 98% of that bile, once it's used, gets recycled and waits for us either later in that meal or for the next meal. If you have a diet that has really high amounts of soluble fiber in it, it can trap that bile and transport it out of the body. It leaves the body. But we need to be able to digest fat. So our body's going to pull on our cholesterol stores to be able to produce more of that bile. And that process is really the only thing that we can do to influence the amount of cholesterol our body is going to utilize. So for individuals that aren't eating enough fiber in general, but in particular enough of the soluble fiber, we're kind of missing out on this really big pathway, like one of the only pathways that we have to be able to remove excess cholesterol from our body.
Wow. And so many of us don't get enough fiber.
Yep. And I often feel like, a lot of people that are trying to diet, which, most women fall into the category of trying to do something to manipulate their weight.
Right.
It's often cut out every single type of carbohydrate, which doesn't last for very long, but carbohydrates are where you find fiber. It's a type of carbohydrate.
Yes.
So if you intentionally are removing the best sources of soluble fiber from your diet without thinking, I'm trying to get more soluble fiber in, then seeing those cholesterol levels increase is something that's really, really common.
Oh, yeah, totally. I wonder, if they've done studies on, I'm sure you know this, but like the keto diet and back in the day, the Atkins diet, the carnivore diet, what happens with cholesterol
Oh
when
my gosh, through
somebody's
the roof.
on.
The
Yeah.
amount of
Okay.
people, and this is another thing that bugs me a bit. Let me just go in for this about
Go,
doctors
go.
is so many people try the keto diet
Yeah.
and then they have their yearly physical while they're in this diet or
Mm-hmm.
right after they've done it. Their
Right.
cholesterol has skyrocketed and they get prescribed a statin. If the doctor had asked them, have you made any recent changes to your diet that could have resulted in this? And they say keto, that should be like a big red flag of, okay,
Yeah.
stop doing that diet and let's see if
Right.
these levels come back down before I
Yes.
prescribe you a medication that you're going to stay on for the rest of your life.
Right.
One of my very first in-person clients, she came to me because her cholesterol was high. Her dad had had a heart attack pretty early, so she was
Mm-hmm.
really concerned about it. I asked
Mm-hmm.
her about her diet. She was doing a keto diet. I said, okay,
Yeah.
in 3 months, let's just change your diet and see what happens. Her cholesterol came
Yes.
down from 250 to 125, which is like one
Wow.
of the lowest
Huge.
cholesterols I've ever seen. But her doctor had prescribed her that statin. He was,
Mm.
again, there was a strong family history there. Doctors
Yes.
don't want you to die. That's what they're trying to
Right.
do.
Totally.
But she did not need, like, it almost makes me nervous to think about how low her cholesterol would be when she stopped keto and was taking a statin.
Oh, yeah. Is that
And
a
it's,
problem too low
you
of
absolutely can.
cholesterol? Okay.
Some doctors would, it depends on other risk factors. So
Okay.
normal level
Got
of
it.
LDL cholesterol, most people should be below 130. I would say
Mm-hmm.
optimal is below 100. But
100.
for some people that have a lot of other risk factors, your doctor might want you to be closer to 70. But we
Okay.
need cholesterol. So the goal
Yeah.
should not be to completely eliminate cholesterol in your
Yes.
body. And it can be
Yes.
too low and impact all of those things that we want cholesterol there to do.
Yes.
Um,
Okay. Got
but
it.
yeah, keto,
Yeah.
carnivore,
Mm-hmm.
Atkin Dr. Atkins ended up dying from, he crashed his Segway, which led to some complications in the hospital. And he was so blocked, he ended up having a massive heart attack or stroke. I
Is
can't
that
remember.
right? I did not know
That's how he
that.
died,
Oh
from
my
his own
word.
diet.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and with those things, it's not
Ah,
just that you really reduce carbohydrates, but you also, for
yeah.
keto anyways, and for Atkins, it was eat as much, and kind of, I
Yeah.
guess, for carnivore. I don't even know the rules of carnivore other than just eat animals. I remember the first time I
Yeah.
heard about that was at a conference, and I thought this lady was like out of her mind. It was like 7 years ago, and she was like an all animal diet, and I was like, what? Why did they
What?
let her in?
Oh
And
my
now it's like something
God.
that's actually out there.
Oh yeah. No, I've
But
def
those
I
diets, they reduce your fiber, but they also really increase typically your intake of animal products to an abnormally high level.
yeah.
That can
Yeah.
really drive up saturated fat to just too high of levels. And some people are very, very sensitive to saturated fat. It can cause the type of cholesterol produced to just stick around for longer.
Mm-hmm.
And again, thinking
Mm-hmm.
about like common diets, automatically cut out a lot of carbs, including good sources of fiber, and
Right.
increase protein as much as possible. And there's other ways you can increase protein, but for a lot of people, that just means as much animal as you possibly can eat. And in the case of keto and Atkins, that is as much butter, as much cheese, as much sour cream. And those things are absolutely, absolutely fine to have,
Right.
but they do not need to be considered a quote unquote healthy thing with the connotation of adding as much as possible because it's going to
Right.
benefit your health.
Yes.
I certainly don't want to live in a world without ice cream. I still
Right.
eat, all sorts of things that
Yeah.
are high in saturated fat, but it's
Right.
being mindful of the fact that my body
Right.
is also, I have a family history of high cholesterol. My body
Mm.
responds to those and could lead to
Right.
my cholesterol being elevated. So it's
Right.
not that they have to be completely removed. It's just that
Right.
you don't necessarily need to go ham on all of those things all the time.
Literally. Pun
Yeah,
intended.
right.
Yes.
Especially if you've removed the soluble fiber from your diet too.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And fiber is so important for hormones and for blood sugar balance. So there's that
Yeah.
too for any PCOS listeners. Amazing. This has been so illuminating. I've learned a ton, and I'm so glad that we had this opportunity to sit down and learn from you. Tell us
Yeah.
about your programs. I want to know. You walked us through a little bit what's included, but how do they work? Are they running now? Like how can listeners find you and work with you?
Yeah. So my course is always enrolling. Um, I just had a baby 9 months ago, and I think what's one of the beautiful things about a course is that I didn't have to
Yes.
stop helping people while I was
Yes.
on maternity leave.
So cool.
So anyone can enroll in the course at any time. The course has 3 phases. As I mentioned, phase 1 kind of talks you through all of the what, when, hows, and whys of cholesterol. Phase 2, we go through each type of food, like each category of food. So we talk about eggs, we talk about meat, we talk about dairy, fruits and vegetables, and
Spelling
like
myths.
things to focus on within those categories. We talk about exercise, alcohol, all sorts of stuff.
Cool.
And then phase 3 is actually putting it all together. So you now have all of this information, but how can you be successful with it? Because if you can't implement the very best diet program in the world, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
And we are not trying to yo-yo your cholesterol. It's much better to see a small decrease that you can maintain as opposed to very big decrease that you shoot right back up the next month or when you can't do it.
Totally.
In addition to all the content that's there, and I love that online format just because you can pause, rewind, rewatch, re-listen as much as you'd like. There's live support. So we have a community group that is super active. And then we have live monthly calls as well. So I designed the course with all of the content and questions that I have been either getting or creating over the past years of being in private practice. So the course is designed to answer all of those questions for you. But I love the Facebook group because I learn about new products all the time in there.
Right.
Yeah,
So
like
amazing.
I've never tried every type of yogurt, and I don't have every type of yogurt at my store, but it's really nice to be able to see course members kind of sharing these recipes that they tried that they really loved, or these products that they tried. And their success stories are also really awesome to put in there.
Yeah, just to have that support network is honestly, I think I would say it's so important, but I feel like it's vital. Seriously. Like, the community
especially if
aspect
you
of
have
these
other
groups.
Right. They're so key. If there's people in your house that are giving you pushback, because most of us don't just feed ourselves. You know, we're also navigating preferences of maybe a partner or our kids.
Right. Oh yeah.
So those are also like, if
Those
you're
are
not
things
getting
to
support
consider.
there because they only want to eat pizza and chicken or whatever, I don't know.
Right. Yeah.
They're giving you pushback for making them eat beans. It's like a nice place to be able to vent those and think about ideas to make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, totally. I love that. So cool. Amazing. And do you work one-on-one or are you just running the programs right now? What's
I
that
do
look
offer
like?
one-on-one sessions, but only for people that have gone through the course, because I don't want to spend my 1 hour with people talking about
Love it.
things that are in the
Yes.
course. So if there
Totally.
are really specific things that, again, they feel like they don't have addressed, or their situation is a little bit different, then I'm happy to offer one-on-one. But for the most part, like I said, I made that course based on working with hundreds of thousands of people on lowering their cholesterol. And my goal was to answer all of the questions that I really commonly got.
Amazing. Wow, what a great resource. Thank you so much. And let listeners know where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at lower.cholesterol.nutrition, and I'm on TikTok at lower.cholesterol, which is a fun and interesting place to be. Yeah, and that's I do show up there definitely on Instagram. My stories, I share a lot of meal ideas because I do love cooking quite a bit.
So cool. Yes, I do know that about you. Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Corey.